Hello, it is 17th of December 2016 and this is another video. I haven't really been posting this week much as I had intended to, but partly because I was sick and I was getting over that, but also because I needed some time to think about the next video and what I was putting into it. I finally got tonight to understand a huge message that has been presented to me this year. And it was about time that I actually talk about this, and it was about time that I actually put all the pieces together, which I think I did this evening. So today's video, I want to talk about omens and I want to talk about cycles. I've come to appreciate in my life that my whole life has been a series of cycles, over and over again, 10-year cycles, 5-year cycles. And what I find myself at right now is I'm at a cycle end, and I'm just about to begin a new cycle. And I really only started to understand this and put this together a few months ago. 2014 in October, I started up my small vending company at the Esotericon. And originally I had it in mind because I absolutely hated my job. I hated where my life was leading. I didn't really go anywhere. My social connections were very limited and were mostly online. And so I decided to make a chance at founding my own company. And I can't really think about what brought me to that decision. But suffice it to say, when I made the decision, it was a very powerful one. Now, I made mistakes early on. If I could go back 2 years and stop myself from, for example, paying a web designer $2,000 to design a website, which I ended up not using, I would do that. But through my company, I started to get out there. I started to make connections. I started to connect with people, and I started to look into alternative things in my life of where I wanted to be. When I ended university, I knew that I didn't want to become a social worker. I trained in university as a social worker, and I knew that if I did go into a field like that, I would become burned out very, very quickly. So I started working for the family business, and I have done ever since. But in 2014, when I was just living at home and living with my parents, working for them, I came to a point where I decided that I didn't like it. The family business is not something I'm passionate about. It's not something I can see myself doing forever. And so it was time for me to actually take my life back into my own hands again. And so I made this decision. And the original idea was that I would start a small business and grow it and grow it and grow it, and eventually I would buy a shop, and I would end up doing a shop. Now, I was very naive. I had a lot of ideas of what a shop would look like. But I didn't have any marketing experience, and I didn't have any business experience. Now, 2 years later, I having had all of those experiences, it's helped me to develop insight into those fields and those areas, and marketing and running a proper business and doing the taxes and all this. So it's been quite an educational process. And what I came to realize was that even though the business itself dwindled, it was necessary for me to do all of that in order to meet the people and be involved with the groups and the classes and all of this that I'm doing right now. And that one split decision to start that company, to start buying in stock, to look into vending at psychic fairs, vending at flea markets, going to pagan festivals, all of these, it was necessary for me to get to where I am now. But, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, the message that I've come to understand is that I need to let it go. and I think I need to understand that it served its purpose. Now, anyways, so getting back on track, because I don't want this video to be too long, like my 30-minute videos previously. So suffice it to say, I started my own business up, and I started to get out into the community again, making contacts, learning about all sorts of new different paths, and eventually it led me to vending at what would become my spiritual group's main festival. And that festival was incredible. I will talk about it more in future videos when it's more appropriate, because right now I don't think it's appropriate to necessarily discuss it, but suffice it to say it changed my life. I also started taking classes, so I was vending at a psychic fair down in Kitchener, Ontario, and I was sat next to another booth that was the book booth, and quite strangely, I really got on with the woman who was manning the booth. I'd never met her before in my life, but there was a connection between us, and I just couldn't stop talking to her. And we talked about all sorts of interesting things, and eventually it got to the point where I became interested in what else she does. She has a holistic health centre down in Kitchener there, the Hive and Grove, and Tiffany invited me to take some classes. I had no idea that she was doing classes. I didn't even know about the Hive and Grove until I met her, and I only live an hour and a half away. But she is one of the professors for the Transformational Arts College down in Toronto, something I'm going to be talking a lot more about in future videos. So I saw that she was doing these classes, and this was September of last year. I had this split second thought. Again, a split second thought. It wasn't necessarily impulsive, but it was more, I knew something was there, but I couldn't quite understand what. And having had gone to what would become my spiritual group's main gathering 2 weeks before, and seeing the rituals that we had done, being exposed to all sorts of different new ideas, and it somewhat created a small vision in my mind, and the two of them came together. And I knew that I needed to go and do these classes. So I started doing these classes, and long story short, basically the classes are 10 introductory classes that you do before applying for other programs, such as the program I'm currently applying for, which is a spiritual psychotherapy course, which is a 2-year course and will eventually allow me to, if I get in, will eventually allow me to practice spiritual psychotherapy with clients, which is, I'm very excited to even think of possibly doing that sort of work. So in a 2-year span, my life went from knowing very few people, because the majority of my friends in university had gone on and done their own thing, left me behind, and I lost track of them, to suddenly having a whole community around me, and it was breathtaking. And even now, I can't believe the difference in my life, So 2016 started. I'd been doing some of these classes, and I had to stop, unfortunately, because the weather in Ontario, Canada, we live in the snow belt, which can become quite dangerous for travel, especially with me, because I have a small smart car which doesn't do very well in the snow. So I decided to stop doing the classes for the winter, and I resumed them later in the year. I believe it was in July, June, August, sometime like that. So I had many months of not doing these classes, and then when I took the class again, it reignited my interest. And it was a sound healing course, which I'll talk about at another point in another video, but it was incredible. It was amazing. So I ended up going to my spiritual group's Tribal Hearth, I should say. It's Tribal Hearth. So I went to Tribal Hearth's winter gathering, which is a very intimate affair. Only 50 people are allowed to come. It's inside. It's 3 days or 4 days, and it was again an incredible experience, absolutely amazing. And I will discuss it at another point if appropriate. But suffice to say, it was another life-changing opportunity. And so in start of 2016, I was in a very transitionary place. I had started a few things. I was sort of continuing others. I was a year into my business, and I was still selling. And I came to a point where there were a lot of things in flux. Things could go either way. I was still exploring, and with Tribal Hearth, I was gifted with the Seeker position. Our ritual structure is basically a 3-year ritual cycle where each event is part of this extended ritual, and people are nominated to take on special roles within. Well, not special. They take on roles within this ritual as almost like a proxy or a scapegoat. And one of those roles is the Seeker, which is to act like the fool, to go into the world bright-eyed. And I'll talk about it in another point in another video, because it really connected with where I was in August 2015. Who I was, where I was at in my life, and it really was a very powerful moment to be chosen to be Seeker. But that's kind of beside the point of what I want to talk about today. So, coming to the main point, Omens and Cycles, I find that my life, looking back on it, and I tend to look back a lot in my life, it tends to be in cycles. It tends to be in 5-year and 10-year cycles. And it's not that I'm coming to anticipate those cycles, it's just looking at my life and what's happened. It seems like those are the milestones. 10 years tend to be huge big things that happen. 5 years tend to be new beginnings. So I'm at the beginning of a 5-year cycle right now. And 2016 has been a very interesting one, because it seems like so many things from 10 years ago, so many people from 10 years ago have come back into my life. And everybody who's come into my life randomly have been loose ends from 10 years ago, or 9 years ago, or however way it is. So I'm going to give us some examples, and these are each of them very powerful, but each of them are part of a big message that has just dawned on me. Each of them is a component in that message that is, I think, going to be taking me into 2017. It's and I don't say that lightly. Like I've really had the opportunity to see this all come together, and it's mind blowing. It's absolutely it's blowing my mind right now. So go back to, I think it was January or February 2016, so the beginning of this year. So I was part of a psychic fair circuit. I'm now no longer part of that because I am switching and I'm moving away from my business. But it was in Kitchener. It was down where I met Tiffany originally, and it was going to be a very snowy weekend. So I decided to stay down there at a motel. And so the psychic fair was a 4-day event, and it was dead. I mean, there wasn't that many people come to it. It was at Bingaman's in Kitchener, and I was staying at a motel just down the road. Now, I use Grindr. I'm not ashamed of that. I don't know why I looked like I was ashamed of that. So I use Grindr, the dating app. It's also a hookup app. So while I was down there, I was using Grindr and was just looking through, seeing who was online, and I get this message from this guy, and he didn't have a profile picture. And it was 10 o'clock at night, I think on the Saturday night or Sunday night or something like that, halfway through the weekend. And normally I don't reply to people who don't have photos because, I don't know who I'm talking to, right? mind you, with those apps, you never really know who you're talking to. But what was amazing was that I decided to reply back to him, and keep in mind, this was in Kitchener, Ontario. So I reply back to him, and he replies back to me, and we chat back and forth. And he says, well, why are you in town? And I say to him, well, I'm here for the psychic fair. And he said, oh, how interesting. It turns out he's really interested in crystals and spirituality and all that. So we chat back and forth, and I say to him, well, why don't you come to the psychic fair? And I can't remember what, but he basically says he can't. And it's snowing a gale outside, and I'm starting to get sick. So at that point, I know I'm not going to have anyone over to, have a hookup with. And so we just continue chatting back and forth through text, and all the next day as well. And he couldn't come to the psychic fair, but he was very interested in it. So he finally asked me if he could talk to me on through text, or if we could talk on Facebook or something like that, instead of having to use this app. And I thought, well, he seems like a nice guy, why not? So I add him. And so, long story short, basically what happened was we were chatting, we were talking, and I didn't see a picture of who he was. Now, when he added me to Facebook, I saw who he was, and he looked very familiar. And I thought I'd seen him before, but I don't really know that many people in Kitchener, and it was a very strange moment, Now, we were chatting about where we came from. Turns out he was from Toronto, or Mississauga, and I went to school in Etobicoke, which is next to Toronto and in between Mississauga. So it actually turns out that we knew each other. Now I came to this realization, he didn't, because and I can't remember what why he didn't come to that realization. He said something along the lines of, I said to him I once went to Humber College, and he said that he would like, he once went there, and I asked him why, and then he explained one of the points why. Anyways, I remembered him from back then, and I remembered that we had hooked up once. Now, when I was 17, 18, 19, I was, new to the city. I'd never been to a city before. I'd never lived by myself before, so it was an exploration phase. So we'd had a one-night stand, and to me, it was just a one-off thing, It was just a one-night stand, and I kind of kept up with him on Facebook after that for a year or two, and then something happened, he disappeared, and I thought, oh, well, that's it. But then I thought, when I came to realize that this was the same person, I was like, wow, in a completely different city, in a completely different time, 10 years later, this had happened. And so I finally came to tell him that, I thought I knew him. And he said, oh wow, I thought I didn't know what happened to you, because we both didn't know why we'd lost contact. And he then went on to say that it was very strange, but very synchronicital, I should say. I can never know how to say that word. He said it was a very strange thing, because he'd always wondered about me and where I'd gone, and he explained that he thought that I had I died or something like that. He thought that I was no longer living, and I don't know what was making him think that, but he basically said, I want to thank you. And he explained that when we first met years ago, and we had that one night stand, he said that he had felt really depressed, and he had very serious body image issues, and he didn't feel like he was beautiful. He had huge issues of self-esteem, and he said that our one night stand made him feel like he was wanted, even if it was just in the confines of one night stand. He felt like it made him feel like he was attractive, even if it was just that one night. and that was a huge thing for him back then. And it was an incredible conversation to go through, and a very emotional conversation to go through, because I remember I have a very, very, very vivid memory, and I remembered the whole thing. And to me, aged 19, it was just a one night stand. But in 2016, the 29-year-old me, I needed to hear that then, because I was feeling really unsure about myself. I was feeling really unsure about my place in the world, and I needed to hear that I had had an effect on somebody like that. And it was just incredible. Now, that was in January. Later on in the year, I was going to a pagan pride day down in Oshawa, or Whitby, close to Oshawa, and I knew that one of the very first crushes in my entire life, who had ever, I cried over this guy, right? As a teenager, I was 15. I knew he'd lived in that area, so I was a little bit worried. And I'll explain why. So when I was 15 and just starting to get into paganism and Wicca and spirituality and all this, I went onto a website called Witchvox, which was and is still a very important website for the community. And it was a place where people could connect, people could put postings, people could put personal profiles on. And I connected with a lot of people back then, because my whole social life back then was online, right? So I started connecting, and as a little gay witch when I was 15, I started connecting with other little gay witches, and all teenagers, all 16, 17, 18, 19. And there was one particular person who I connected with, and he was 19 when I was 15. And I developed a huge crush, huge infatuation with him, and I put him in my mind on a pedestal. He could never be wrong. There was everything that came out of his mouth was wisdom. I thought, oh, you're amazing, and I developed a huge infatuation on him. And I remember one night sitting on the couch with my best friend, when we were just hanging out one evening, and she went off to make coffee or something like that, and I just started bawling because I was so madly infatuated with this guy, and it was unrequited love, right? So I did meet this guy several times, and he came up to hang out in my home area, and then I went down to the very first psychic fair I'd ever been to, actually, and it was him who introduced me to another person who eventually introduced me to Hinduism, which would become a huge part of my personal practice. So this guy was really tied to the beginning, right? But I was placing him on a pedestal. I'll give you an example. I remember one time, when I went down to the psychic fair, it was my very first time spending a night away. I think I was 16, and so I'm in a car with this guy, my other friend, and the guy's boyfriend, who was much older than all of us. And there was some sort of a game or something like that, a touchy-feely, and I said to somebody, hey, get your hands off, Rahim, or whatever his name was. What I meant to say was the guy driving, but what I instead said was, get your hands off the guy I was infatuated with. And I was mortified. I was as soon as it came out of my mouth, and the whole thing went silent for a few seconds, and it was very awkward. Anyways, it was a very awkward situation. But isn't most teenage love awkward? So I was very concerned, because when I started getting older and I started to develop an understanding myself, this guy had less and less of an effect on me, and he was, to be fair to him, he was in a very different place in his life as well. And I was very anxious to see him, because I hadn't seen him in about 9 years, and I didn't know what I would say to him if I did see him, But I mean, I didn't think that I would see him, you know, because in my mind, he was just in my mind, right? He ceased to be a real person, because I hadn't seen him for so long. You know, I refused to believe that he was still there. And so in my mind, he was like on that pedestal in the back of my mind, of that 15-year-old mindset. And so I went to this pagan pride day, and I saw him. And when I saw him, I started getting butterflies in my stomach. I started sweating a little bit. I was with some friends who were vending, and I came to realize why I was nervous was because I had held him in such high esteem. His acclamation of me, his looking at me as if I was an equal was important to me. Even after all these years, you know, I wanted his, what's the word? I wanted him to acknowledge me as an equal. Because I had placed him on a pedestal in my mind, I wanted him to finally say, "You've arrived," finally validate me, right? And even after all these years, even after all my experiences in life, everything I've been through, I was still having that little tiny bit in my mind. And when I saw him, I became nervous because I still, in some small way, saw him as that person on that pedestal, saw him as the teacher, the ultimate, you know, and he wasn't. I mean, last time I physically saw him 9 years ago, he stumbled into my friend's store and said that he had just taken a load of acid, and that was just who he was back then. So, but you know, it's a weird thing when we make connections in our mind. And when I saw him, as I said, I started developing butterflies. I was nervous, I was anxious, and I thought, oh God, what am I going to do if he comes and says hello? What am I going to do? Because I don't want to feel like I'm stupid, right? And I'd gone to the Pagan Pride Day because I was offering workshops on some of the areas that I was introduced to by him. So it was a very weird moment. So what eventually happened was I actually did go and talk to him, and I hate myself for doing this, but I think it was just, you know, weird things that people do. But I almost tried to blank him, and I almost tried to say, "You look really familiar. Do I know you?" and see what his reaction was. But it was just a game, right? So I started chatting to somebody else who'd been to my lecture, and I was lecturing on the Hindu gods, and this guy, and I think he'll probably be watching this video. If not, I'll send it to him. But he's really connected with Ganesh, and we were talking about that, and very intelligent man, has many interesting theories. And then the guy I was infatuated with, let's call him Timmy. So Timmy came over, and I said, I happened to mention, oh well, Timmy here is the one who first got me into Hinduism all those years ago. And I did it so nonchalantly, I didn't even have to say, "Hello, how are you?" You know, I didn't have to break the ice. It was so like, oh, just a random, oh hi, I haven't seen you in years, that kind of thing, right? And he looked at me, and I don't know if it was him feeling awkward, or him just not recognizing me, but he didn't seem to know me. And it was a very weird moment to be in, because here he was, somebody who in my mind I had relegated to such a high status, and for years I've seen him as, in my mind, as that teacher. And then for him to look at me as, and there's no recollection. And that was a huge blow to the ego, but it was important. And I think what was important about it was that I could finally let him go. You know, I could finally let him go. I could finally see him as just the human being that he always is and always was. And I realized it was all just me. It was all just in my mind, you know. But I finally could let him go. And that letting go, like afterwards, I just felt so like, oh, you know, like all the anxiety, all the butterflies, all the, like the little teenage boy I was could finally just let him go, you know. And it was I mean, I was still, it was just, it was powerful, you know. And I needed it, because in my mind all these years, as I said, I've put him into a box in my mind, and to finally just release it and say, I don't need his validation. I don't need to compare myself to him. I just need to be me, you know. It was powerful. Yeah, it was very powerful. And it led into another chance meeting that I had. The third out of the four that I want to talk about. And it was following the same idea of letting go, you know, and all these loose ends finally coming together. So to give you a background on this guy, so in that same period when I was on Witchfox and I was getting to know people and specifically gay guys around my age or a little bit older, I met this guy who was considerably older than myself. I think he was about 27 when I met him at age 16. And we chatted online, we chatted through email. I know email, who emails anybody anymore, right? So we chatted online and we emailed back and forth, and he was in a very unstable place in his life back then. But I developed an infatuation, very similar to the first guy. And where was he? One year, it was the very first time I met him. There was a group of us from high school who went down with some other people to Gay Pride in Toronto. I think it was 2004. Yeah, 2004. I went to Gay Pride, and I met this individual for the first time, and it definitely wasn't what I thought it was. You know, looking back, he wasn't who I built him up to be in my mind. But I was so infatuated. I think infatuation was the key term of my teenage years. But I was so infatuated that I didn't care, and it didn't. It was like cognitive dissonance, right? So I went and met him. It was a great time, and the following year, we continued emailing back and forth. And he had been living with his parents, and then he moved up to God knows where. He moved up somewhere else. And it seemed like that was a pattern in his life. He just moved around continually. And in 2005, about 3 months before I was due to move to Toronto for school, I ended up going down to Toronto and to spend the weekend with him. And at that time, he was living up on Jane Street, and he was in an apartment a one-bedroom apartment with a couple and a small child. And it wasn't what I expected it to be. It was uncomfortable. It was very strange, and I ended up actually choosing and deciding to leave early because he was never around. I went to visit him, specifically spend time with him, and he was working nights and would sleep during the day, so I never saw him for 3 days. Instead, I was spending time with his roommates. So I decided to go home early and not look back. And then something happened where he blocked me and he didn't want to talk to me anymore. And I finally got a hold of him, and he basically point blank said to me, "I don't want to know you anymore. Please don't contact me again." And at that time, my self-esteem was very low, and any sort of rejection wasn't put into context. I couldn't just look at it and say, well, he's having issues. I haven't done anything. It was me. I thought I was the one who was called, and I couldn't understand. And it hurt. It hurt a considerable amount, because I'd been chatting to him for about 3 years, and I considered him one of my close friends, because I didn't really have any close gay friends at that time. And after that, in my mind, I held a huge bitterness. And I'm not proud of this, but I'm going to share it, because all these years, I never got, I never really knew what happened to him. There were few instances here and there where other people I met and knew him or knew of him, and it wasn't positive. But in my mind, I always had this image of finding him in an alleyway, destitute, me getting out of a limousine, wearing a beautiful long coat and just looking fantastic, right? And looking down at him in his destitution. I'm not proud of that, but that was like the bitterness. That was coming from bitterness, right? And hurt. And all these past 10 years, he's lived in my mind as causing bitterness, and I hated him. Absolutely hated him for what he did to me. And I mean, looking back on it now, okay, he just blocked me on MSN, and he didn't want to talk to me. That's fine, but it was a betrayal for that 18-year-old self, because that 18-year-old self had never experienced anything like that, and so I couldn't put it into context. I couldn't understand. It was a blow to my self-esteem, and it was a blow, and that's why it hurt so much, because rejection. I mean, I'd been bullied a lot during elementary school, and so I was used to people rejecting me on my sexuality or whatever, my accent, immigration status, whatever. But when it came to somebody who knew the true me, at least the true me from back then, and then for them to reject me, it was a huge blow, And all these 10 years, as I said, I held him in bitterness in my mind. And what happened was, earlier in the year, I think it was the middle of the year, I saw him randomly post on Facebook. Or maybe it might have been much earlier in the year, like at the beginning of the year. But I saw him post on a friend's post on Facebook, and I saw that we were mutual friends. And I thought to myself, oh God, it was a very similar feeling, butterflies in my stomach, like, sweaty palms. I was sent right back to that 18-year-old self who was hurt. And I thought, here he is. There he is, So I decided to contact him. And I think I framed it as, oh, I haven't seen you in so long, how are you? And he responded, and it was very neutral, and it was very like, oh, hi, and it finally came out that he wasn't in a very good, and as I said, he wasn't in a very stable place in his life, but he wasn't in a very good state either. He wasn't in a very good place at all when I knew him. And he has some memory problems. I won't say his name because he might actually be watching this, so I don't want to say his name. But he was having some memory problems, and so I raised because I as I said, I have a very good memory, and for people's details, like stories about people, I tend to remember very, very well. And so I said to him, I used to know you a long time ago, about 10 years ago. And he said he doesn't really remember a lot of people from back then. And so I said, are you the, because his name is quite common, I said, did you live at such and such a place, and in 2005 were you living here? And he said, yeah, I was. And so, and then I can't remember what the conversation was like, but basically it came to a point where he said, listen, I was a very different person back then, and I want you to know if I hurt you in any way, I'm sorry, that wasn't who I am now. And when I heard him say that, and this was all over Facebook, I should say, I haven't actually had a chance to sit down and have a coffee with him, although we've tried to plan it. When I saw that, I knew what the message was, and all the bitterness that I had held for so long, all the hatred of being hurt back then, it all just disappeared. It just went away. And I was very surprised, although I'm not surprised now, because I think it shows who I am as a person now. But I felt utter forgiveness for him. And I didn't feel pity for him, but again, I saw him as a human being. And I came to that point where I could forgive him. I could forgive him for hurting me. And I actually went on, and I think I explained to him what had actually happened and how it made me feel. And for him to take responsibility, even though he couldn't remember doing it, it shifted it. In my mind, it was like, oh, I could just let it go. I could just let it go, and it went, and it disappeared. And it's no longer part of who I am now. It's no longer part of my being. That bitterness is gone. It doesn't change the fact that I was hurt back then. But it's that forgiveness, and that was so powerful. I honestly cannot explain to you how amazing that shift was. And I genuinely would like to go and actually have a coffee with him and sit down and see who he is now, because it seems like he is in a lot better place. He's done a lot of work on himself. He owns his life now, which is very different from the person I knew more than 10 years ago. So that was the third powerful experience. And again, another loose end that has now been tied up. And then the fourth one, and he is still on my Facebook, and so I won't say names again, but I wanted to express this, and if he does listen to this, I'd like him to know how much of an experience it was going through this with him. So when I was in college, I'd actually I'd made quite a few gay friends and gay Wiccan friends, gay pagan friends, through a website called Mystic Wicks. And ironically, actually, Mystic Wicks has now come back. It was a very pivotal part of my development, or very early development as a Wiccan. And it really helped me. It gave me a platform to work through ideas. And it's amazing because it went offline for many, many years, and I thought, and it was a very sad time when it went, because it was an archive of my conversations with people, my development. I started on there when it was early 2004, and I stayed on there until about 2010, and it went offline, I think, 2012. So after 7 years, it's come back again, and reviewing back through some of my old posts on there, it's incredible to see how far in what 13 years I've come as a person. But that's a story for another time. So this fourth person, and we'll call him, I don't know, we'll call him Robbie. So I'm on Facebook, and there's a person on there who I follow and I'm acquaintances with, who I respect tremendously, and everything he posts is fascinating. And he posted something, and this person, Robbie, replied back to him. And when I saw the name, I was like, oh my god, because this person is somebody I met on Mystic Wicks. And we chatted as friends. We hung out a few times, not many times, but we hung out a few times. And to be truthful, I did develop a crush on him back then. And something happened where he'd started dating a guy who had also went on a single date with a friend of mine, and I was in a place of jealousy back then. It wasn't positive. It wasn't a positive place to be in. But I was in a place of jealousy, and I'd caused some drama because I didn't think that this guy should be dating two of my friends at the same time. I crossed a boundary, which I should never have crossed. And Robbie became quite upset at that, and quite truthfully so, and quite rightfully so. You know, I never had the right to do that, and the place I was coming from was jealousy, you know. So we ended up not being friends, and eventually I think he deleted me from Facebook and didn't want to talk to me anymore. And I've held such a huge amount of guilt from that all these years, and I never thought that I would actually interact with him again, because again, all of these people were put into my mind. You know, they were always relegated to spaces up there, and I never actually thought that I would actually interact with him again. And then to suddenly have 4 of them appear in 1 year, you know. So I made the decision again, because by this time I was getting the gist of what the message is. And so I made the step to actually contact him and say, "Hello, Robbie, how are you?" And we talked a little bit about, you know, a few things, like what have you been up to, that kind of thing. And I said to him, you know, I want to apologize, because all those years ago, you know, I overstepped a boundary that I should never have stepped over. It wasn't my business, and it caused some friction. Well, it didn't cause some friction. It caused friction between us, and you were quite rightful in you know, wanting me out of your life, because, you know, that was inappropriate. And he sort of laughed, and he said, "Oh, you know, I can't even remember that now." And it was like, oh, you know, I've built this up in my mind to be such a huge thing, but I'm taking responsibility for it. And then for it to, you know, just disappear, and for him to not take it as seriously anymore. And I think what the message out of that was that I needed to get rid of my guilt. I needed to express that guilt, because I've never been able to express it before. I've never been able to apologize, and it was really festering inside of me, because all these years, you know, I lost a friend because of my own actions, and that is something that I am dealing with. I've lost quite a few friends because of past actions, and I take full responsibility for those actions. At the time, I wouldn't have, but I do now. But of course, that being said, a lot of those I'll never get closure on, and I think that in itself is closure, understanding that I'll never be able to get closure on those. So we chatted a bit after that, and we still chat every so often, but I mean, obviously our interactions are much different now. You know, he's if I can even call it a friendship, it's not the same, and I don't expect it to be the same. You know, it's an acquaintance, and it's fun to hear back from him. But I think the main part of him coming back into my life was that I needed to get rid of that guilt. You know, it wasn't so much that it was debilitating, but it was part of it, and it was there. And the connection between all of these people has been that there was some sort of a romantic connection, whether it was just coming from me, or if it was just a one-night stand sort of thing. But it was connected to the heart, right? And the heart chakra. And ultimately, what I came to understand, the message of 2016, the message of these 4 people coming back into my life, is that I'm now at the closing of one chapter and the beginning of another. I'm now on the final page of chapter 2016. And all of these are loose ends that needed to be closed in order to help me get into my new chapter, to look forward. The message is, stop living in the past. You can't change it. The message is, look to the future, because that's what you can affect. That's what you can change. That's where you should be living, right? You're doing a disservice to yourself by having all these ghosts. And I wrote this out before and posted it on Mystic Wix. I had many ghosts surrounding me all the time, and some of them have now been laid to rest. And that's been so powerful. It's been absolutely amazing to go through that experience. But it was like a sledgehammer, you know. I finally got it. And I thank whatever higher spirit, higher power, whatever is out there for arranging that to come into my life, for arranging that and these 4 experiences. Because in each one, the message was that I helped and affected somebody's life. I was able to get rid of guilt. I was able to forgive. And I was able to see that I don't need anybody else's validation. And that I could let all of those people go, you know. And so I think that ties into what I wanted to talk about, omens, and being able to see the messages that are constantly coming into our lives. And 2016 has been one of change, of transmutation, of evolution. And part of that is the plan that I've been coming up with for my life, and the understanding that my destiny is not to live in Canada. Over the past, well, going back a few, and I will talk about this in another video, I don't want to take too much time on it through this video, but when I started to develop an interest in perhaps taking on a more spiritual role professionally, I was taking a tarot class in September, and one of the other women in this class, who I respect tremendously, she's a very interesting woman. I want to get to know her much better. But she said to me that she was now in the spiritual psychotherapy program by using a PLAR, which is a prior learning assessment. Now, I never finished my university. It was one of those things that halfway through the year something happened and I had to stop. And I don't want to go into it right now, but I couldn't finish my degree, and I always intended to go back, but living in the country 3 hours away from my school, it was very difficult to go because I had to do a full year practicum. So I always assumed that if I wanted to pursue this spiritual psychotherapy program, I would have to finish that degree first and then apply. And then what Kerry told me was that, no, you don't need to do that. They take into consideration any prior learning that you've done, and then base that decision on whether you get into the program. So I'm now in the process of applying for this program with the understanding that I don't need to have my degree completed, because they can take into consideration what I've already done. And at that moment, I knew, yes, I need to go and do this. So I'm in the process of doing this work, and the course starts in September coming up, and it's a 2-year part-time program, and afterwards then I have to do 100 hours of contact time between clients and myself, supervised, in order to then qualify to become a psychotherapist. And finally, I started to think about, what would I do if I set up in Canada? What would I do if I set up in the UK? And I started to contact some of the agencies in the UK that are like professional associations, and the legislation over there is not as stringent as it is over here. So it's not as legislated as it is over here. You just need to fill certain classifications for the professional association, which just so happen to be the minimum qualifications over here. So I started to think about what would it be like to set up shop over in the UK and return back to Wales or England or maybe Scotland. Probably not the Isle of Man, but that's another story. And so as soon as I kind of put that out into the universe, I started meeting people again through Facebook, because it's a very important place that I connect with people now. I started putting it out, and as soon as I did that, I started meeting people, and there were about 5 of them who were from my home area in Wales. There's a guy named Dylan who does videos here, and he's amazing. There's a woman named Nina who also does videos, and then several other people on pagan chats who just happen to come from, Tremerkian or Caerwis or all these places. And it was incredible because, again, looking at omens, looking at signals and messages in our lives, all of those, and as soon as I connected, and each one I connected with very randomly, I didn't go looking for them. It was like, okay, I get this, I understand what you're trying to say to me. And it was powerful when I start to actually understand the messages constantly, because we're constantly being bombarded with messages and omens and signals and symbols, but we're not in a place to really understand them. So the message there is that, yes, that is a possibility, yes, that is a very real place, because all of these people are spiritual people, all of them work within that sphere, and or a part of it, and like someone like Dylan, for example, actually works as a spiritual healer in my home area, like somewhere in like middle of North Wales, like, so it's very powerful to have that affirmation after I just sent it out, after I just come to realize that this is what I want to do, because it all culminates, it all brings, like, everything I did when I was in social work comes into this work. And I've had so many people say that this is the sort of work that I should be doing, but I need to do my own inner work. And when I came to realize that the big message of 2016 is loose ends and letting go of the past to look to the future and stay in the present, it's almost like a foreshadow of work yet to come. And I'm very honored that I'm able to, and a little bit scared too, I must say. I'm very, very scared about what kind of work that still needs to be done, because there's a lot of things that I still need to work on, and there's a lot of things that I still need to come to terms with in my own life. So that is my, I don't even know how long it is, probably about 50 minutes long. Yeah, about an hour long, which actually I feel pretty good about an hour, to be honest. So if you're still with me, thank you very much for watching that and sharing this time with me. I genuinely really appreciate it. Look to the future and be in the present. Don't cling to the past, Have a wonderful evening. Bye-bye.